Hello and welcome to the coronavirus update for the 6th of October 2020, where Donald Trump has been released from hospital and triumphantly returned to the White House and immediately took off his mask and then went on Twitter to say that what are we making such a big deal about coronavirus for when the flu kills 100,000 people per year and we just get on with it. Well, okay, that's a perfectly valid opinion to have if facts and logic and reason don't enter into your decision-making process. I mean, let's just start with the obvious, right? Let's just take these numbers at face value. Let's say there are 100,000 people every year who die from the flu. Well, already from coronavirus in North America, in the USA, you've had 200,000. So it's immediately twice as bad as the worst flu seasons. But hang on, let's just do a little fact checking on this number that 100,000 people a year die of the flu. And we come to the CDC numbers and we find out that they're overblown by a factor of somewhere between 4 and 10. So, on a good year, you only get 20,000 dying from the flu. And we've not even got to what we expect to be peak season for the coronavirus, and it's already killed 10 times that amount. Or if you take the worst bracket of 60-odd thousand, you're already 4 times worse than that. Now, you'll immediately at this point get the coronavirus conspiracy nut saying this number is massively overinflated. To which the answer is, actually, this number is lowballing it. Right? And they'll come up with the odd anecdotal story of, someone who gets squashed in a garbage truck or something and gets diagnosed as having died of coronavirus, which is absolutely preposterous. And from that, they will say that therefore there is massive over-reporting of deaths as coronavirus deaths. Well, if that were true, you would have about the same number of people dying this year at this time as you did last year at this time. And that's just not true. So we look at this thing called excess deaths, right? You take a look at your average year at about this time, how many people were dying, and you take a look at this year. And what you find is this number lowballs it probably by 30%-ish, right? So, but we'll take this number for the moment as 200,000 odd people have died from this. Now, the thing is that when you look at these numbers, this is for the whole flu. This is for the whole year, right? This is for the whole of the flu season. And first of all, we've not even got there yet, right? We've not even got to where you expect the peak deaths from coronavirus to be, which is in winter. Might not be true in this case, but, this is the expectation. And now we take a look at the number of infections. So this is for, the unrestricted spread of the virus through the population. That's basically 100. No effort to contain it whatsoever. That's wild spread rate. Right? We can take a look at how many people have actually been infected by coronavirus in America. Well, America's got about 300 million people in it. And so I'm going to lowball this one. I'm going to call this 6 million just to make my numbers easier. So 300 million people and 6 million have it. So if you take 300 million, 300, you divide it by 3, you get 100. You take 6 divided by 3, you get 2. So it's about 2% of the population in America have, on paper, had the virus. 2% of the population has had it, which means that if you just let it rip through the rest of the population, it's going to get about 50 times worse. But let's be generous and say this number is actually lowballing it by, let's say 10% of the population has actually had the coronavirus at the moment. So that would mean 30 million people in America have had the coronavirus, which means it can still get 10 times worse, which puts your projected deaths at 2 million ish. Assuming you don't do anything. So to start comparing this to the flu, where the unrestricted spread of it kills at best half of this amount, and you're already 4 times that amount on a couple of the percent of the population actually being infected, that's not so good. And I'll just say a few quick words on the president's miraculous recovery, which is impossible. You see all viruses like this sort of have a life cycle. They're all basically down to how quickly cells can reproduce and how quickly cells can produce viruses, and those can get into other cells and that sort of thing. And that's typically a 2-week cycle, 14, 15 days, that sort of thing. The first 5 days is a cook-up. So that's when you get exposed to the virus and it finds, oh, this is great. There is all this biomatter that I can commandeer to replicate myself, and it goes completely ballistic. And during that time, your immune system, if you're lucky, wakes up and it starts identifying all of these new bodies, these virus particles, and it starts creating antibodies. And this reaches a peak when you get the most symptoms, which is about in the middle somewhere. And then the last 5 days or so is your body doing cleanup. So it is absolutely impossible for you to go from infected to cured in a day. It's just not possible with the virus. If they did replicate this quickly, people would burst into flames because they would be generating so much heat and all that sort of thing. So that's just not possible. Now, the other thing that should be stressed is... right, so I mean, we've got it on paper very clearly that the White House messaging is really not to be believed. But the one thing that they said which raised an eyebrow, well, actually 2 things. The first thing was hydroxychloroquine, which Trump had promoted tirelessly for months, wasn't even mentioned in his treatment regime. Although I did notice that they made very, very conspicuously that when the president was listing how he was being treated, they put zinc in there, because all these conspiracy nuts think that zinc is a magical key for stopping a virus. The answer is absolutely not. These are complicated life cycles of viruses and cells. You are not going to be able to stop these things up just by adding something as simple as zinc. It's a complete non-starter. I mean, if that was true, viruses would have been wiped out billions of years ago. Right? If all you needed to do to stop a virus was add a little bit of zinc, there wouldn't be any viruses on this planet at all. Evolution would have sorted that stuff out billions of years ago. Right? So zinc is just a complete non-starter, but they made it very clear that that Trump was receiving zinc. But hydroxychloroquine wasn't even mentioned, and that's because it is absolutely completely ineffective, as would be expected. I've said this many times before, but there has never been a virus, ever, where a virus comes along and you just randomly try some treatment, some other drug, and it works. I mean, it's not that it's impossible, but the biochemistry is so specific on these things that it's basically never going to happen. So Trump didn't get hydroxychloroquine, despite sort of saying that, there's this very credible woman who believes in aliens and demons having babies and all that sort of thing. And she says that hydroxychloroquine's got a marvelous cure rate. Despite promoting that, he didn't decide to take it himself. But he did, or one of the things that was listed is that he got an antibody treatment. And that, for me, Yeah, that's the sort of thing that would work, or it's the sort of thing that sounds immediately credible. So the way that your body typically gets on top of a virus is, viruses are just these tiny little balls that sort of when they get onto your cells, they sort of inject their stuff into them. So you've got to basically get some stuff to stop it from sticking to your cells and injecting its contents into your body, and those are called antibodies. Those stick to the outside of the virus, and normally that's what your immune system produces. And once it's stopped the virus's ability to infect new cells, then it's just a matter of cleanup. However, they said that Trump got antibody therapy. Now, I didn't know that you could actually isolate the antibodies, but yeah, I mean, in principle, if you inject the antibodies into people, then that should work. Or at least it'll give you a temporary reprieve. Right? Because the bottom line is that your body has to be able to produce these antibodies. Right? It's a stopgap measure. If your body doesn't start producing antibodies itself, then the virus will kill you. Right? But in the meantime, kind of like a blood transfusion, you put some antibodies into the body, and that will actually give you a reprieve. But it's a clearly very expensive and very, not everyone gets this sort of treatment. But, fundamentally, if Trump's body doesn't start producing the antibodies itself, then in all likelihood, the virus will just come back and it's just a roll of the dice again. If your body doesn't start producing the antibodies quickly enough, then you die. It's basically the way that it goes. So anyway, that's where we are at the moment. What can I say? Elect a clown, expect a circus. So, give this a thumbs up if you found that useful, and I will see you next time. And thanks for watching.